And here we are, back into the thick of it, with the character and plot-heavy arc on the sea. And no, I'm not talking about One Piece, it's Hunter x Hunter's Succession Contest arc aboard the Black Whale. It's been a year since the last update, but the princes of the Kakin Empire are still in the middle of the Cutthroat Challenge, ready to do anything to win before they reach the Dark Continent, which would be a whole other headache to deal with. So let's get into what's going on in Chapter 401. In Chapter 400, Melody was trying to investigate the princes to find out what was going on with Fugetsu's aura and the creatures it was attracting to her. This time we continue from the end of the chapter when Kurapika meets the royal bodyguard Long Hee, who works for the 5th prince, Troupe. Now on the 10th day on their voyage to the Dark Continent, with the travel being 2 months total, the guard is called in. Furikov, who works with the 1st Prince Benjamin, is already expecting Long Hee to take drastic measures against the 14th prince. As a reminder, the 14th is the youngest, Prince Wovel, and is under Kurapika's surveillance to help him out since he's just a baby. Before Kurapika even needs to fire up his Nen divination to see if Long Hee has malicious intent, Long Hee explicitly announces that they can use Nen, but having nothing to do with the snake. This is a reference to something called Silent Majority, a Nen ability belonging to a user who hasn't been revealed yet. Long Hee shows off their ability, drawing a floating paper in front of them. Long Hee's ability is called Transparent Words, a manipulation type that gives the person who signs the temporary contract a buff or a debuff within certain conditions. One of the restrictions is that the signature has to be by choice. And the reason Long Hee explains that is because they want Kurapika to agree to a contract with the 5th prince. The problem is that Long Hee hasn't told Troupe about the Nen ability, this agreement, or even what the real goal is moving forward. Kurapika seems hesitant to sign, especially since Troupe has no idea and he has his own prince to protect. Kurapika readies his Nen and a gun, about to end Long Hee because of how misleading this contract seems. Not only is Long Hee not intimidated, but apparently Transparent Words effects don't allow any lies to be spoken because of the ability. So apparently it's all true, and they just want a peaceful deal between him and Troupe, and even to offer some extra power with the agreement if Kurapika signs, that is. So Kurapika calms down a bit, waiting for an explanation on Long Hee's real goal. With a gun still pointed at Long Hee, she reveals, yes, this is the first time we even know her gender, that she's beyond Netero's daughter. That's shocking enough, right? Doesn't mean Kurapika will let us guard down, though. About 30 years ago, Beyond, who is the late great Isaac Netero's son, in case you forgot, convinced an elite soldier from the Kakin Empire to arrange a fake marriage. From there, Beyond got busy all over the place, having kids and sending the offspring to be raised by adoptive families and trained in the Royal Army School to have one for each prince born out of the Kakin family. Long Hee only realized this was Beyond's plan because her Nen didn't match what her father had, and seeing all her siblings in the same guard roles as her only further proved it. Plus, her adoptive father told her that that was the case, so the other guards she's related to aren't aware of the situation like she is. Long Hee claims that she doesn't see herself as special or anything since learning that, but clearly things have changed. Early on, all Beyond's children were sent to live in the dorms, giving the kids not much of a bond with their fake families, and the parents themselves often discuss Beyond's plan together, but nothing that went outside the scope of Kakin national policy, so they weren't suspected of anything. But Long Hee describes her and her siblings as sacrificial pawns. From birth, she knew basic Nen abilities, like 10, which of course wouldn't be the norm. So military school was nothing for Long Hee, but there was also a curse that came with Beyond's plan of awakening them so young. Long Hee only realized that something was off when she spoke to her half-sister, Makaha, who worked for the 2nd prince. She wasn't given a high position as a guard as expected, and her parents seemed like they didn't even care that she wasn't a close guard. So after getting checked by a Nen user, they found a mark on all their bodies, a dark effect that can only trigger when they die. It can only be seen with Gyo though. When Kurapika looks at it inside Long Hee's mouth, it's almost like a scene from The Grudge. An eye is encircled by strange letters, and has a seriously ominous vibe to it. So now it's clear that they're meant to kill the princes they're assigned to, with at least 10 of them having powerful Nen to do it. But Beyond's a smart psychopath, and prepared other people to enact his plan, just with less powerful curses attached to them. And unlike other curses, it can't be burned away or cutting the skin to remove it. Beyond wouldn't put something so easy to dispel if he's been preparing his plan for 3 decades, right? So the problem isn't so much that they're cursed, but that they're basically bombs for him to trigger when the time is right. It's highly unlikely that they could stop him from killing them if he chose to end their lives and start the curse's ability. Bill reminds Kurapika that people are waiting outside and that it's taking too long to check Long Hee like they were supposed to. They kind of have no choice though, since part of the contract is knowing all the details, considering Makaha wasn't triggered when she failed to get close to the second prince. Beyond might not be only after the princes after all, or maybe not all of them, and just a specific one. No matter who the targets are, Beyond wants to end the succession war, and likely cause chaos. And the scariest part is that no one's aware of his plan, which means it's possible that Beyond strengthened the curse holders by leaving it up to random chance that they activate. Kurapika considers that the first prince is probably the best choice to attain the throne, since he could then unleash martial law and control the entire ship. But Long Hee disagrees because Beyond is too much of a conniving, selfish, and meticulous monster to let someone else take all the power. Which leaves us with the theory that one of the princes is actually a child of Beyond himself. The guy sure has been busy. It sounds crazy, but considering that the only conditions are the princes were birthed by one of the queens and not a child of the king directly, it's possible. Oh, and Kurapika hasn't stopped holding the gun or the chain while all of this explanation is going on. Like Bill predicted, they start to wonder if everything's okay in the room since it's been a while. So he decides to blame it on a stalemate regarding the agreement with the 5th prince and his side. To avoid suspicion, he also offers to explain everything after they've closed their deal. Of Prince Benjamin's family are convinced Long Hee's the snake user and can't be trusted. So finally getting into the agreement itself, it's for the 14th and 8th prince to have a contract with Troupe for non-violence altogether. They can't hurt any member of their group's side, including the guard, and it automatically renews for a week at a time so long as Long Hee is in room 1014 at the designated time. In other words, if she's taken out or delayed for whatever reason, the contract would end. As for whatever happens if they break the contract, they'd be forced into Zetsu for a week. And considering Kurapika's abilities rely on truth and revealing intent, he worries that his ability would trigger the Zetsu effect. But so long as no damage or intentional harm is done, it won't be considered a breach of contract. Long Hee, of course, adds her own personal objective of finding who Beyond's child is among the princes before the succession contest ends. If they find that person in time, there's a reward. And even if it turns out none of them are related to Beyond, they still get the reward. Long Hee's also considered the chance that Troupe finds out about her connection to Beyond and the curses, so the contract would become null. But then she'd also just write up a new one between her and Kurapika at that point. Apparently, there's a one-time usage of Long Hee's ability, which I'm assuming is the Zetsu for a week, considering how broken that is. And Kurapika seems on the verge of signing the contract, especially since his ability hasn't detected any lies or malice from her. But there's still one thing, her real motive. I know it sounded like she already said that she wanted to find Beyond's son among the princes, and that was it. And probably to find a way to get rid of the curses, right? But nope. Long Hee wants to personally kill whichever prince turns out to be Beyond's son. And this wouldn't have been the case had Beyond been honest from the beginning or told her after she was old enough to understand his goal. They exit the room finally, in silence, with the guards outside waiting for the conclusion. As Furikov analyzes both Long Hee and Kurapika, he can't find anything amiss or big changes in their nen that points to a clash. Instead, he sees that Long Hee is crying, which makes it even more mysterious for him. Amazingly, he can't tell there's a tiny change in Kurapika's net, but it's so small that it could just be that his mind is considering something. He also guesses that it might be a hidden ability that only manifests if the right conditions happen. Kurapika admits part of the contract, which is a peace treaty with Troupe, but he also tells them that he and Long Hee's side couldn't come to an agreement, and even how much of the details they would reveal to the group outside. Furikov doesn't believe it, and honestly, I wouldn't either. Kurapika invites the representative for the 3rd prince in to talk next, and Furikov knows that he can't really come after Kurapika and risk losing or strengthening their side with no proof. When he jokes about wanting a new job assignment, Bambi Mina has a strange response. We then focus on Beyond, who we've barely seen until now. He's chained and finished reading a book, expecting another one, but the defense member and Zodiac named Tiger suggests that he write a novel, knowing Beyond's not allowed for security reasons. And he points out that the book would be enough to kill Tiger if he chose to, with the guard barely bothered. Instead, Beyond asks to see someone because he wants to talk to them. Who could he be asking for? Well, the mystery continues. We continue, still on day 10 in Zhanglei's room, where he's told by his guards that if only him, Wobble, and Troupe are left, then they'll let him win by stepping down. But it's unclear if it would count if they just let him win like that. And that's also only a possibility if the other princes somehow exited the contest. And considering strong personalities like Siraidanik, Benjamin, and Lazarus are still in the running, it doesn't seem likely to happen anytime soon. In room 1005, Troupe speaks with her team about how Kurapika has accepted the peace offer and agreement, which seems to be in direct conflict with what he announced publicly. Mayor is also the one to convey that Kurapika will only follow this contract so long as the Queen and Prince are there when he visits. And the third Prince's soldiers also expect the same, in order to have beneficial information circulating in their parties. The third Prince is Zhanglei, just in case you forgot. Troupe has no problem with any of the demands, but mentions how she's happy to be with Wapol and the Queen. This strikes Rihan since this agreement proves that they're closely working with the 14th Prince, and Kurapika by extension. On his side, Zhanglei has been handing out coins as instructed, but nothing seems to be coming of it. Either it's because a certain condition hasn't been met, or perhaps the right target hasn't been given the object. Despite that, Zhang continues to tell those he hands them to that it brings luck. He mentions that the effect is supposed to trigger on the 10th day, but then wonders if it can't because he still has them in his possession. Troupe is also contemplating why Siraidanik didn't attend the banquet, and if it has to do with not seeing her as a possible ally. To be honest, I feel like Siraidanik would rather make enemies of everyone. That aside, Troupe also worries how she can get the focus off of her and onto Zhanglei instead. Since Benjamin assigned Rihan to watch over every move, she says to mention at Kurapika's training session that her people emphasize how close they are to Zhanglei while around Benjamin's guard, and right after that she signs the agreement and a conditional ability is activated, making the guardian beast show up behind her. It's a giant frog/toad, by the way. Balsalmico, one of Benjamin's guards, takes a block from his boot and reveals a set of tools used for assassination in them. They ended up being discontinued since they failed in the past, but he believes that it would be perfect to take out Haukenberg. It causes stomach issues, which could make it appear as something contagious, which would mean the person would be in quarantine, and innocents would be spared from being involved. It can actually cause organ failure in half a day, so long as it's inhaled within 30 seconds of being spread through the air. Considering there's a limited time in range, that's why it fell out of use. But for the task of taking down a prince in a closed space, on a boat no less, it would be easier to create the ideal scenario. After considering all that, he's convinced that he should use it on Prince Haukenberg, putting a release mechanism in his sleeve, and the rest back in his boot. In room 1004, Siraidanik is training on the 11th day to multitask physical effort and end use. He impresses the guard, Salkov, who admits he's been using Zetsu since birth. That's a clear indicator that he's one of the children planted by Beyond, just like Long Qi. Regardless, what Siraidanik can do now is the same ability as someone who's been studying Nen for at least a year. He mentions that what took him half a year is accomplished in a day by Siraidanik. So I think it's safe to say that he's a fast learner, maybe even a Nen genius. But Salkov also begins to worry, knowing Theta warned about his behavior towards politics in Nen, how it's only to fill a desire. The fact that he can activate a Nen ability while in Zetsu makes Siraidanik an outlier, even compared to specialists. And this seems to mean that a contract with someone like Long Qi and her Zetsu effect would only help him in a way. A guard informs Siraidanik about Melody being kept in holding and how they want to extend the time. When he hears that Benjamin has assigned guards to Melody, he orders his own to make a move and keep the other prince away. Whether or not it's because he thinks that she can help him win, he wants her to be on his side. But more impressive is Siraidanik using Zetsu, walking on a treadmill, talking and using his phone at the same time. Talk about an overachiever. Zetsu gains a new mark that looks like an insect bite on her neck. Kacho insists insists that it wasn't there when they tried to escape, so it's new. Melody compares it to an injection mark, but it's clear from how little she was outside that it's from Nen. And as you can guess, it has conditions involved to activate whatever it's meant to do. Melody says it explains that weird, almost manic behavior Fugetsu had before. How she could endlessly open doors, when before it was only one per day. This means that not only is it meant to make Fugetsu overuse her Nen ability, but to ensure she opens multiple doors at once. Melody immediately picks up on this and wants to test out her theory, and the only way to get Fugetsu out of the mode that she's in is to show her the doors, and a trap in one of them. It's also causing addict behavior in her. From the power trip, maybe. So now, more than ever, it's necessary to stop Fugetsu from using her Nen, since she could die in a few days. Kacho's got a plan in mind, though. Jumping to con-candy-haired Luzarus. Kacho thinks it has to be him since he already shamelessly uses the families to smuggle in drugs. She's insistent that it's his guardian beast's effect, though. This brings up a couple things. The rule that princes cannot attack each other, and that the beasts don't kill each other either. But seeing as they think Luzarus isn't aware of what's going on, it wouldn't break any rules if he ends up hurting or killing Fugetsu. And Kacho was just a plan to get Luzarus' Nen Beast to stop its unintended attack. One of the things Fugetsu was doing earlier was testing the distance she could travel through her doors. But one space was off limits to her. Still, she can go to any place she's been before, but they haven't yet tested if someone else can follow through. Kacho specifies that the only restrictions involve both Kacho and Fugetsu passing through the doors, so Melody could freely go through in theory. For the plan to work, Melody knows that they need more people involved. Not only do they need to control Luzarus with her music, but someone has to keep him restrained physically, maybe even strangle him. But Kaiser thinks that's a bad idea, when it would work better for them if it looked accidental instead. So, the sussy Kaiser suggests he be used as the cover, and that he take him to be investigated. The guards will remember being put under a spell by Melody, and they'll likely be tested positive for drugs in their system, so it could be blamed on hallucinations. So here's the cover story. Luzarus was having a drug overdose, so he planned to escape on a boat, but died of a heart attack while he was leaving. The problem is, like they just said, anywhere Fugetsu wants to use her ability has to be a place she already visited. And she definitely hasn't been in Luzarus' room yet, since he barely seems to leave himself. Kaiser offers to help accompany, while Kacho finds a reason Fugetsu would have to meet with all the princes and not just Luzarus. That way she would make herself seem less suspicious. The plan is to convince all the princes that Kacho left a will behind for all of them, in case she passed away during the succession battle, which she did. But no one's currently aware of her death, except Melody and Kaiser. They're even still hiding it from Fugetsu, not to upset her. Either way, it gives them an excuse to visit all the princes at one time, to hand the letters. There's also roadblocks, like the trust issues and not wanting the justice members to see sensitive information, which Kaiser says that he can work around. He's even willing to go in by force by filing warrants if necessary. But Melody seems hesitant to trust him, considering he professed his love for her and his heart didn't even change in any way. As much as Melody doesn't want him involved, Kaiser explains that he thinks Fugetsu would be the best choice to win the succession contest and bring about change, because he believes it would allow Kacho to protect her and stay by her side. But Melody can't hear any changes in his heart still. Considering he might be manipulated by an outside force, she can't let her guard down. When he mentions wanting a peaceful world, Kaiser says that he's willing to dirty his hands for that cause if needed. As planned, the security and guards accompany Fugetsu to the prince's rooms to bring the letters. They start with the first, Benjamin, needing permission from the guards to speak with him and hand it over. They explain the details of it being a message that will be left should she die, and that it needs to be handed in person. And with Kaiser high-ranked in the Justice Department, he ensures them if there's explosives or dangerous contents in the message that's being handed in, he will take responsibility. The guard says to give it to him so that he can check, but Kaiser insists that it might be something with specific details like succession information that's not meant for everyone except the prince. So Benjamin
Benjamin hears that and allows it. When Fugetsu makes her way in, she's covered in dark spirits, as we know, and Benjamin finds it awful to see. She offers the letter and he takes it, but his guardian spirit also attacks the lesser beings attached to Fugetsu when she approaches. He wrongfully assumes it's due to her grief at losing Kacho when she's still unaware, but also predicts that she has about 10 days left if this continues. After confirming there's nothing special in the letter, Benjamin asks about Moose and whether the Justice Department have found him yet. And there's no point trying to check all the prince's areas because it would be wrapped up in court and trials, and thankfully he's not willing to subject everyone to martial law for it either. Also, Kaiser realizes just how dangerous Prince Benjamin is for considering using martial law on everyone to find a single person's location, which would be something used on a national level. He also made sure to choose time when Balsamico wasn't around. Speaking of which, is he gone to do the deed against Halkenberg? Tubeppa and Tyson accept the letters with no problem, and then there's one more prince to see. Luzurus himself, who barely moves to receive the letter from Fugetsu while lounging in his room. He offers her condolences at least, with Kaiser keeping straight-faced and the guards looking stern while they wait. You'll recognize one as Basho, who worked with Kurapika and Nostrade family during the York New arc. Luzurus asks whether Fugetsu knew about the letters and says that they're all different, so she wouldn't know the contents. Unlike the other princes, he believes his is related to the succession contest, so he hands it over to the Bureau, which was Kaiser's intention all along. In a flashback, Kaiser says the Justice Bureau keeps critical information in their department to avoid any conflict among the princes, and that's the kind of information he allowed to leak to Luzurus. Melody immediately wonders if it's something Kacho would know, but that's not the point. It would lead to them all being unsure and seeking out the cause of the information spreading anyway. Back in the present, the letter to Luzurus is about Kacho wanting Saraidanik as far away from the throne as possible. He wonders why her dying message would be to attack another prince rather than protecting her sister, which seems more important. But it causes enough doubt in him that he intends to keep watching the situation. With everything going smoothly, Kaiser asks Fugetsu if she needs to rest, and by means of his connection to Melody, Basho offers to help with the small spirits plaguing her, if only for a short period of time. He hands her a charm to keep them away. After doing his job, he knows that the rest is up to Melody, otherwise Fugetsu won't survive much longer. After all that talk of Luzurus being the problem, Kacho suddenly decides that they should find a plan in case it isn't his fault that Fugetsu's getting worse, and Melody can't move while using her instrument to control her targets, which requires someone like Kaiser to help with moving others. The other problem now is that Halkenberg hasn't received his letter because there was a loud noise, indicating that his guardian Nenbeast was involved, which likely led to his collapse, unless it was meant as a distraction for something else. Either way, they need to get Kacho's message to him as soon as he's awake. His letter, unlike the others, has bombshells of information regarding his family and other princes. More importantly, they mention his birth, which could be a hint at either being related to Beyond or meant as a red herring, so we think that he is. And considering this series, it would be too obvious if he ended up being Beyond's son. A lot of the fans think that it's clearly Saraidanik, which might also be too obvious because of how advanced his Nen is. Could it be someone more innocent, like Wobble, perhaps? Alas, Melody's expecting Kurapika to do the heavy lifting that's left since she's still stuck in detainment, and he's the one with the ability to sniff out lies that could cause damage to the person themselves, with his chain-related Nen techniques.
We saw last time that Balsamico, Benjamin's guard, wasn't around after he said that he would take out Prince Halkenberg, and this time we actually found out what happened with him after he prepared the assassination device for use. Anyhow, let's get into this chapter that I'd like to call a 4D chess battle. It starts on the morning of the 11th day, with Balsamico on his way to fulfill his assassination plot. He has knowledge of Halkenberg's Nen ability, which boosts his allies and allows him to trade their bodies/souls with each other or himself with an arrow. And since none of them are around currently because of the trial or to patrol and stand guard, Halkenberg is more vulnerable than usual. And as we found out, the TSK-17 only works on close range targets since it disperses through the air.
So Balsamico considers that it might affect a couple other people around during the trial. But it would be fine if Benjamin unleashes martial law and gets most people separated/quarantined. Of course, it's a lot easier said than done. Vict, a guard working under Benjamin but assigned to Halkenberg, is behind Balsamico, and he conveys with hand signs that they know Halkenberg's true ability. But while he's saying that, Halkenberg's preparing an arrow to fire and swaps souls/bodies with someone. And the rumbling sound that was described in a previous chapter is finally revealed here, a sign of the Nen ability activating. Not only does Halkenberg calculate the trajectory and compensate for any margin of error, but he aims for Balsamico's position. Benjamin questions what's taking so long to hear from Balsamico and regarding the trial, but it's been postponed by both parties for Halkenberg's side. He asked for more time because of his poor health, which was something he had heard previously when Fugetsu was trying to deliver a letter to him. But this is where the 4D chess begins. Benjamin's men reported equipment failure, which was just code for they messed up and didn't kill him as planned. But he also wonders if there was a mutual attack, and that's why the trial was pushed to another date with both sides affected. So when Balsamico arrives, requesting to speak with Prince Benjamin on the phone, things get a bit tricky. Speaking with Balsamico, Benjamin is very careful to let him say everything and only ask for details to try and sniff out whether he's been manipulated or something else. And with Halkenberg having passed out as soon as he shot the arrow surrounded by his followers, it's hard to tell who exactly is in what body now. So, to ensure Balsamico is who he says he is, he won't let them return to his post until he completes the assassination attempt. And if he fails, Benjamin will enact martial law to prevent any snakes from reaching him. It seems like he's being too cautious, but he's very smart and considered the danger of trusting Balsamico after that sudden change of events. And if Balsamico is actually Halkenberg deep down, well, plotting to kill your original body to trick a fellow prince is pretty intense. For a moment, it seems like Balsamico's confidence that he'll kill Halkenberg today makes him consider trusting him, and that would be a mistake. What with all the Nen abilities and beasts around. Keep in mind we've gone back to the events of the last chapter, but now from Benjamin's side of things. So he received the letter like before, but now we're more aware of why his guards were extra cautious of letting Fugetsu in with him. Then we get a short conversation between a queen and her son, Halkenberg, and how she intends to back him and his choices, which is likely related to him switching bodies. But this queen is not the second one, which is who we were told was his mother. She's the first queen, the same who birthed Benjamin and Chrollo. Not only is this another bombshell since it ruptures the succession contest and the hierarchy, but the fact that it's written in Benjamin's letter and he pretended that there was nothing important to share, well, clearly he didn't want the information to be spread. Sure, Kacho's letter says it's a rumor, but it's not something to take lightly, and that's what bothers him more is the fact that she found this information and not him and his team. Then we see the reactions of the other princes to their letters, with it being clear they also received leaked information. And yet, the 4th and 13th princes refused to read or even receive the ones meant for them. That's right, Chrollo rejected even seeing it. But there's a theory going around that he might have used a Nen ability to read it extremely quickly, and that's why he's told his people to toss it. Because he was done with the info. On the bright side, there's now distrust among the princes that can keep them from making any sudden decisions. As for the 13th prince, Mariam, he's been moved to a false version of this room thanks to his guardian beast's ability. And his guards were sent to his real room to make it seem like he's still there. And Fugetsu seems to be resting properly now that Basho helped her temporarily get rid of the spirits on her. She was not only getting drained of her life force, but it seemed like she couldn't sleep for long unless Kacho was with her. Meanwhile, in room 1014, Kurapika discusses how leaving the war results in death. But so can this succession contest, with some princes having already been assassinated. But unlike the no-win situation that it seems, with death or murder the only options, Kurapika sees this as an opportunity. He explains that he'd need her permission in order to enact his plan to keep the younger princes from being harmed. But we switch to Zhang Lei, still stumped with regards to his Nen beast and coins connected to it. He started with 10 coins, and he handed out 3 of them. And it's been days, but for some reason, a coin that had a value of 1 now says it's a 10. So with no other ideas, he calls his guards to help brainstorm what's going on with them. They've got some interesting ideas that the value changes every 10 days, or that it's necessary to look at the coins that were handed out, and watch if their behavior changes in any way. And of course, there's the chance that they'll steadily keep growing in worth, with it being a huge sum by a month or longer. But these are all things Zhang already came up with. So he's not too impressed. All that's left is to contact Kurapika, since he seems to be more informed and experienced when it comes to unknown Nen abilities. But let's get back to the mysterious confrontation between Balsamico and Halkenberg. Kaiser discusses with a colleague about how Halkenberg's ability can cause mass feigning, but then the people affected are back to normal after a short while. But what's unusual is that on top of the 10 followers being struck, someone else, not even in the same place or at the same moment, was also affected. And as much as Kaiser would like to pretend it's nothing of concern, it could be a big deal. So he asks about the person and their location, a certain Wario Bay. And just as planned, Kaiser interviews Wario to find out all the details. But to get him to relax, he also tells him about powers, which we know as Nen usage, and how leaving the ship triggers a response if it's one of the royals leading to death. And he offers an agreement with Halkenberg, like with Tubeppa and Zhang, so long as he can help protect Prince Fugetsu. Wario shows the symbol on his hand, proof that he's an ally to Halkenberg and also his connection to Nen. He follows that reveal with an even bigger one. Halkenberg is going to die soon. Don't let the immediate cut to Benjen and Balsamico discussing the assassination being successful fool you. He insists that the proof will come in the evening, but we all know that Halkenberg's been up to something. So yeah, Halkenberg's body might be about to die, but his soul seems very much alive inside of Balsamico. And not only would that allow him to avoid martial law, but he could be around Prince Benjamin and take him down that way. But anyway, Kurapika's request turns out to be that they should reveal the contents in Prince Wobble's letter, seeing as all the recipients were given some kind of secret information. But the plan is also to continue Nen training and offering the special secrets for those who participate. But if you, like me, forgot about a certain Serahel, a guard for the second prince, who intends to kill Prince Wobble at the Nen classes, apparently it activates when she ends herself, which sounds frighteningly like the revelation that we just got from Longkey and her siblings all being cursed and used as pawns. And who knows how many others have the same kind of plan in mind. But for the reason Kurapika wants to risk making the letter public is to see which princes will come forward, and offer a bargain, or threat, to keep the information from being public. At the end of the chapter, we see Kurapika heading to Zhang Lei's room, likely to help uncover the secrets of his coins.
I hope you've got your thinking caps on, because this chapter not only goes into all the coin theories, but old characters return and possibly some death flags for others. So let's not waste any time and get right into it. Picking up right where it ended, Kurapika's faced with the same challenge of understanding the coin's power and what their purpose is. After looking at them lined up, he agrees that they probably change after 10 days like they all assumed. But then there's the problem of too much money in circulation, which is why the coins are meant to change hands often to keep them moving and not simply growing infinitely for one person. But to prove that part, Kurapika knows they have to see the ones that were given out. Zhang's guard, Temptori, immediately notices this is different from the others, which is all the proof they really needed. One side is the same, but the other changed. In theory, they should change depending on who has them in their possession, so Kurapika tells Zhang to give them all out to test it. The first person he offers it to, though, is Kurapika. The thing is, Kurapika doesn't trust him right now, and having him take one could put him at risk. But Zhang is the perfect excuse of trying to kill two birds with one stone. Not only would it verify their thoughts, but Kurapika could see it himself since it would be his coin. As much as Kurapika wants to refuse, doing that would make Zhang less trusting of him, and could ruin the partnership he's trying to build. His main worry isn't what it could do to him specifically, but what it could force him to do. Considering it could be a manipulation type of Nen ability, having it on his person for a certain time can make him affected by it, and follow an order that he couldn't resist. Still, 10 days shouldn't be enough Nen build-up for him to kill someone, or himself. It's more likely to only show its true power when and if Zhang wins the succession contest. With that in mind, and considering Zhang might not become king, the risks are low for Kurapika. Once he accepts, his coin changes, as they expected, and looks just like 10th Tori's. So he hands it back to see if it shifts again, which it does. But the number doesn't go back to 10 like when Zhang had it, staying at 1. With just that, Kurapika has a better sense of what's going on with the coins. But he worries about telling Zhang in such an open space with others around. So Zhang's sure his ability can't hurt Prince Benjamin, so it's safe to go into details. But everything Zhang says is a misdirect and a hidden message. Some things that only Kurapika would be able to pick up on. By saying it shouldn't endanger the first prince, he means that Kurapika has to keep any information that could a secret. Rather than a manipulation user, Kurapika thinks Zhang's guardian beast uses conjuring. Because of that, the coins have to be kept for a long period to build up the right amount of net, unlike how money usually functions. Since the rest is a lot of calculations and giant numbers we don't use in everyday math, I'll summarize. So after about 6 months' time, Zhang's coin should have enough power within them to get him to unlock his Nen power naturally. In other words, instead of forced opening like Killua and Gon did, it would be a painless method to acquire Nen, as long as he's patient. And that's also assuming he survives, with how the contest is going. The part Kurapika doesn't say out loud is that it's risk-free to Zhang, but his guardian beast would need something in return, likely relying on the loyalty of those around Zhang to be manipulated into this agreement. Once again, we're reminded that it means Zhang gains the most rewards if he becomes king, and I suppose telling his guard/followers that he'll reward him when he does could be enough to ensure they remain loyal. But Kurapika's no fool, so he knows not to mention the coercion part out loud. Not to mention, there's also one person who hasn't revealed their coin that they received on the very first day. Koven Toba, Benjamin's guard, watches and listens intently near them, kind of creepily, I might add. Considering the time that's passed, and the person who hasn't shown their 10 coin, they're probably doing it on purpose. Not only because they know what it means, but they're trying to keep Zhang in the dark so he can't figure out the full extent of his Nen Beast's power. Who else could it be than someone working for another prince? With the records available to know exactly who's hiding their card, Kurapika intends to use that information as leverage if they find out he's keeping information to himself too. Gotta have insurance for everything on this boat. Zhang thanks Kurapika and is told to keep a few coins just in case it could change how they function. And he hands Kurapika back the one he had before. This is clearly a means to ensure that Kurapika stays on his side. The problem is that Zhang only ever says half of what he means, but thankfully we're privy to the deeper meaning behind his fake civil behavior. His attitude in terms of believing himself better than Kurapika and only taking information because of the connection to Prince Wobble starts to show us his true colors. And he asks about Kurapika's Nen classes resuming, as if he's concerned for him, when we know he's not. It's just so calculated. Plus, we can't forget that he's linked to the ZU Mafia family, which means that he and the other princes who have Mafia connections are doing a balancing act currently. One move can change all that and cause chaos to erupt in the lower tiers. But Benjamin's the one who could get the most out of a mistake like that, since he can call martial law and take over the ship whenever he thinks it's necessary. With that being a risk for 3 of the princes, they wouldn't start conflict for no reason, risking them all in the process. That also means that it's more likely Benjamin himself could create the reason for him to enact martial law, which could then give him the advantage. But to do that, he'd have to either fake a prince's death, one who works with a Mafia family, or straight up kill them for real. This is where the death flags come in for Saraidanik, Luzarus, and Zhang. My bet is on Zhang because of how long his Nen ability from his guardian beast needs to fully form, compared to the rest. Plus, Saraidanik is out here breaking Nen records, so I'm not too worried about his survival. Kurapika has a big decision to make, which room to stay in with Prince Wobble. In 1003, Benjamin is keeping a close eye with his guard. In 1004, there's a guard for each prince, but it also works in his favor. And we still have no idea who the mystery killer is, so everywhere could be a gamble. But who cares about that right now? Leorio and Cheadle have returned. They're of course trying to treat Halkenberg, who we knew last time was at death's door. Apparently, Balsamico won't wake up so long as he doesn't fall asleep. So the dying Halkenberg will stay unconscious. All he has to do to complete his death is to get his mom to refuse an autopsy, so it's considered an unknown cause. By the way, I'd like to mention that people have started calling Balsamico's body inhabited by Halkenberg Balkenberg, so it's clear who's in control. Balkenberg tells Benjamin how Halkenberg's doing, and that his mission should be done in 12 hours or less, but it will only work out if the Hunter Association doesn't start investigating. And in case you're wondering what happens when Balkenberg needs to sleep, because, he will at some point, the moment he wakes up, the person who was affected by the ability will be put back into a coma. And then we finally get details on Halkenberg's ability. So it swaps souls, but also gives priority to him and his followers, which I forgot to mention there were 12 of, just like Jesus and his disciples. To be honest, there's a lot of aspects he hasn't tested yet, and he's doing on the spot with this Halkenberg plan. Not only does he not know if he can win with just his soul and not his original body as the prince, but he can't be sure what happens to the other person's soul when the bodies they're swapped into dies. He's taking big risks to try and win this contest, but then again, he did try to unalive himself not too long ago. Plus, he seems to be wanting to take over another prince's body so that he can win like that, since he knows that Balsamico will return to his body and be able to take control of it if he doesn't poison him beforehand. Meanwhile, Salkov's having 5 panic attacks because Sraidanik is improving like crazy, and there's no sign of slowing down, even though he complained that it's taking him longer to improve than before. He wants to work on his Zetsu technique until he can get to under a second, and for him, 2 weeks is a long time to accomplish that. I wonder how he'd react if something just didn't come easy to him in the future. His view of what he can do and how much time it should take is out of the norm. And Salkov is terrified, knowing that he's supposed to spar with him eventually. It's decided that the next round of Nen lessons begins tomorrow morning. Oh boy. Prince Camilla's guard is joining, and the rest are the same as before. The problem is that plan to take out Prince Wobble. Thankfully, they all suspect Camilla has bad intentions, which is why her guard is joining now, and didn't in the first round. So Kurapika quickly asks Bill and Shimanu to put Prince Wobble's safety as their top priority, just in case his instinct is right. Balkenberg conveys the final wishes for his dying body to Benjamin, an announcement, a send-off from his supporters, and a private funeral. He agrees to it all and even wants to avoid angering them. Plus, he's dropping his lawsuits against Halkenberg. What a generous guy. He does insist that Balkenberg treat them all respectfully, and that seems to make Halkenberg kind of touched by Benjamin's decisions. The announcement is done, and anyone who wants to see him off can go to a staircase leading to Tier 1. But the Phantom Troupe members are watching too, and seeing as Halkenberg isn't connected to any Mafia, they immediately don't care. Instead, they're focused on getting to Hale Lee's hideout. You know, that other crazy person who thinks she's Jesus? Anyway, Nobunaga wants to confirm something, and Phaeton seems to think that there's no point because they're just going to kill them all. But I think this might be critical for their upcoming fight. Phaeton might regret not following Nobunaga's instincts. But anyway, we're definitely headed to some intense conflicts, and I can't wait to see who survives. R.I.P. to Halkenberg, but now is the era of Balkenberg.
Guess who's back? Besides the Phantom Troupe, who we saw at the end of last chapter, it's Hisoka. Maybe. Probably. Okay, there's been a theory going around that Hisoka and his less violent demeanor is actually Chrollo in disguise. But let's ignore that and just go over the juicy details of the chapter for now. We begin with rich people playing cards and a familiar profile handling his cards, but not in the way that we're used to. You guessed it, it's a laid-back Hisoka, with his hair down, but standing out with his attire and luck anyway. For anyone wondering why Hisoka wasn't involved during the Chimera Ant arc, well, he's not into animals, apparently. So even he has a limit as to what he wants to hunt or get quote-unquote excited by. And the same applies to the Succession contest and their guardian Nen beasts. I guess any time a non-human is involved, Hisoka wants nothing to do with it. He's only into aggressive love with someone one-on-one. This is an interesting thought, seeing as he attacked the troupe and now they're all out for him. He might not have a choice but to deal with a group when that happens. But here's the kicker. Another Hisoka, a fake, is nearby watching him stroll through the VIP area looking dejected.
It's none other than Bonolenov, disguised as him. So sure, we weren't right about it being Chrollo, but we were right to think it was a fake. In a flashback, we find out Chrollo gave Bonolenov the order to do that. And he knew someone like Hisoka or the Troupe would draw the attention of the Mafia families, but they couldn't recruit them without shifting the balance of each group. So instead, they'd offer a room in Tier 1 among the VIP guests, which is exactly what happened. But the thing is that Hisoka or another fake? See, now, knowing that Bonolenov can transform further leads us to think that another fake could be roaming around. And it might not be Chrollo, but it could be Illumi, Killua's brother, for the right incentive. If this is the true Hisoka, though, invited by a prince like Chrollo predicted, then Bonolenov was right to hide from him. Oh, also, let's call him Bono for now, or Bono. Bono's that guy from U2, so I'll say Bono. So Bono does a quick switcheroo into Al from the York New arc, and we're given the details on his metamorphosis ability. It allows Bono to change into anyone he's spoken to before, lasting for a time relative to the height difference between him and the one he switches into, but also depending on how long he was in front of them. Quite a few chapters ago, we met Hingri and his allies, Lynch and Sakuro. Seeing as her abilities involve hitting people to reveal the truth, useful but dangerous for people like the spiders, she got off-screened by Bono as Hisoka. And unfortunately, only the user of that ability can hear it, so Sakuro had no warning about the situation. It eventually led to her being killed, switched out, and leading Sakuro away from Henry, and the truth as she said she was going to do. It seems that as of now, her body hasn't been discovered, but what if she has some post-mortem Nen ability that reveals all the truth she wasn't able to before dying? Then he might regret not disposing of her body better. Not only do we get more insight into the inner workings of the Troupe, but we get a sense that Bono is uncertain of his decisions. And he's even worried he might have made a mistake, which is very different from the other spiders who act first and regret later. But another thing he reveals is the page that Chrollo is seeking. This points to Chrollo having used the premonition ability he took from Neon Nostrade in York New, and finding out that someone has a power that can help take down Hisoka permanently. And despite saying that the Troupe members can be replaced, and even he doesn't matter, Chrollo still hasn't filled Pakunoda's spot after her death. Bono picks up on that, knowing it means that the members matter to Chrollo a lot, especially the original ones. So whenever they kill Hisoka, if they do, then the spiders may cease to exist as a group. But let's take a step back into the Troupe's past. Remember how one of their precious friends was cut up and thrown into a bag like garbage? Well, it turns out 10 years ago, the man and organization in charge of that gruesome act was slaughtered by Chrollo and the Troupe. Not only was he in charge of a child welfare nonprofit, but he was respected as a philanthropist. On the upside, they haven't been able to find the ones in charge of his death, and it'll probably remain that way. After that, we finally get back to Nobunaga, Finks and Phaeton, and they're prepped to attack the Hell Lee family. But before then, they have to talk with Kenny Wang and Tejao of the Sha'ar family, temporary allies. Previously, Nobunaga wanted to confirm something about the Hei Lee family, and it happens to be whether or not they're the actual Mafia family. It becomes even more suspicious when we find out that Morena only came to power recently, so it's possible she kicked off the previous boss and changed how they work entirely. Anyway, this conversation goes on for a while with Nobunaga basically figuring out that Hei Lee worked exactly how the Troupe does. There's a head who makes the broad decisions, and the members then choose the more intricate paths to follow to reach that goal. But apart from that, they're allowed to do whatever they want, so as long as it doesn't disrupt the boss's end goal. As for Morena, well, she is of royal blood, but not eligible for the succession contest. And those kind of children are purposely put as heads of Mafia families, either to appease their dissatisfaction or to keep them busy, or maybe just to give them some semblance of the amount of power their eligible siblings have. Everything related to Mafia and Kaken seems about keeping balance and avoiding conflict as much as possible. And with that in mind, Morena seems like the last person you'd want in charge of the Hei Lee, since she's ready and willing to attack the other families as she pleases. But she also just likes to kill anyone else that comes across her family. In many ways, it seems like Morena's goal of destroying Kakin allies with Beyond's plan to have children as guards to the princes to take them down. But, except, Beyond wants one to come out on top, probably, whereas Morena just wants to destroy what she can't join herself. With this as a possibility, maybe Morena is the person that Beyond wanted to speak with a couple chapters ago. We still haven't found out who that person was. Back to the Troupe and the Cha'ar family, though. Since they're all not interested in being killed off, it only makes sense that they would work together to eliminate the Haley family instead. Survival is just as important as following urges and desires. Something to pay attention to is how Wang speaks to himself about Morena needing to be more careful. Whether this is a hint that he's playing both sides or that he's looking forward to her being trapped by the spiders, we can't say yet. But he also mentions her having to play her Joker sooner than planned. Now, there's a few things this could refer to. A wild card, or a hidden ability perhaps. Or a literal Joker, which could refer to someone like Hisoka. Besides that, I think it's a mistake that only 3 Troupe members are heading into battle first. The other Mafia family fighters and even the Troupe members might arrive too late to save their allies, especially considering how Morena's ability allows her to level up her group fairly quickly. Speaking of which, Morena's seen speaking with Dogman, who's already leveled up to 62 since the last time we saw him. Because of his upgrades, his sense of smell improved, allowing him to sniff out a Nen user's type of ability within a 5-meter radius. And if he gets closer, he can tell if they learned Nen or not yet. This of course means Morena is seeking out a specific Nen ability and its user for her plan, similarly to Chrollo and his page that is able to kill Hisoka. If they find the person, Dogman has to point them out to Sodom, who will then kidnap the person. But it will only work if they haven't awakened their ability yet. It doesn't seem like an easy task. And as Gelato says, the person likely doesn't want to help with whatever sadistic plan the Haley have. So it's going to be a kidnap and manipulation / convincing game. Meanwhile, the members who got beat down by Henry are spending all their time leveling up for revenge. Whether this means he has his own death flag looming over him is another question. I doubt Henry can level up the way Morena's crew can, or had time to focus solely on advancing his Nen techniques, like Saraidanik has been. But there's no time to consider that when Nobunaga, Finks, and Phaeton are faced with a sight that leaves them surprised by what they're seeing. Tajao says it will be unpleasant, whether to see or due to a Nen ability. But they still don't expect it. Considering how much death and murder the spiders deal in, it has to be something either entirely inhumane or so crazy that it shouldn't be possible. I'm wondering if it's the corpses of the victims being used in some kind of shrine, considering Morena's Jesus iconography and similarities as a martyr. But there's many things it could be, and we might never be able to guess because Togashi's brain just, is built different. But there's so much going on at the same time, and it's easy to forget Haukenberg's funeral and Kurapika's classes are also going to overlap with things that the Troupe and the Mafia families are all planning. I feel like we've heard so much about martial law that if Benjamin doesn't use it, it's because Haukenberg has managed to take him over, or, just pulled him out of the competition entirely with death or maybe a coma. As for Hisoka, the one that we saw in this chapter, who we can read his thoughts, is that the actual one? And if so, is it possible Illumi is also pretending to be him elsewhere to draw the Troupe one way and get him to perform a surprise attack on individual members like he had before? We're moving closer and closer to so many violent encounters between the Mafia families and the Phantom Troupe coming for Hisoka. And not to mention the princes and their distrust of each other while they slowly get whittled down. Something big is coming, and it's almost here. But we're actually skipping back a few moments before the reveal of whatever shocked the Troupe members. And Nobunaga's told his weapon being on full display will be a problem because it's clearly made for aggression. So the Cha'ar member is willing to take it to keep him from being shot by the newer, more nervous guards. Even Finks and Phaeton think Nobunaga's showing it off too much. Then we're given an ominous look at the outer part, but still inside of the Black Whale, so the Troupe can make it their way to Tier 2. The heavy black lines Togashi uses and the massive expanse of it gives you a creepy feel instantly. A rickety staircase is waiting for them to climb. Everything about these panels screams danger is imminent. Finks points out how the awful smell reminds him of Meteor City, since there's waste from thousands of people passing through there. Tajao makes it clear that the people in Tier 5 are treated worse than sewage though, since the processing plants are above their area. And to the surprise of no one, the two allied Mafia families, Cha-R and Ziyu, are the ones who deal with the sewage. This is likely to be able to dispose of bodies at their convenience without being caught. Kind of like how the Mafia are often shown owning butcher shops or pig farms or whatever, you know. But Nobunaga pokes a hole in that reasoning, telling Zhao that since they hire contractors for the messier work and don't expect to be told about the results or murders, people from the High Lu could take advantage of them. All they would have to do is pretend to be working with waste, call people in, kill them off, and then send them down the line to be processed. Zhao clearly isn't used to the brutality of the world because he feels normal after hearing them speak that way. But because of them coming to that conclusion, Nobunaga has to go back, leaving only the other two to face whatever might be up ahead. I already said it was too little of a group to face the Hail Lee, but this seems way worse. Also, since Nobunaga and Henry were the ones who dealt with the trap feature of the Hail Lee's hideout, it would have been best that they stayed. But since he insists on questioning some workers, well, he has to relay all of the information to Finks and Phaeton as clearly as he can. It also works as a good recap for us since those events happened in chapters that came out years ago. Phaeton doesn't seem worried about that mechanism from one of the guard's abilities, but Finks has the more realistic reaction of being frustrated with Nobunaga keeping those details from them until now. Going forward, we move through the disposal areas, and the spot Henry left the tracker for them, it continues to beep its location underneath the shelf. Meanwhile, the funeral proceeds for Halkenberg, with his body being moved where people are able to pay their final respects. A huge crowd is gathered, and Sakura blends in among them alongside Henry. But Lynch is missing. We know she's dead and left somewhere, but Henry wasn't part of that whole body switch up that Bono Lenov pulled. Still, because Bono made a good excuse for her, Henry tells Sakura to meet up with her later and question the Hail Lee members. Except, someone else has discovered her dead body, and Henry's notified right away. The patrolling guards were the ones to find her, and made sure to contact Henry's people. Her body is twisted in a gruesome way, with her head backwards, a brutal way to be killed, honestly. But because it seems like it was done by a professional, they don't immediately point a finger at the Troupe, but the Hail Lee again. Henry wasn't so convinced though, even suspecting Hisoka of being the cause. But then Sakura mentions that if it were Hisoka's doing, he'd be dead too. Not only that, but Lynch was speaking in a way that seemed unusually calm for the situation that they're in. Showing off his deduction abilities again, Henry puts it all together. It wasn't Lynch that woke him up, but someone pretending to be her. Unfortunately, they think Hisoka has some kind of manipulation ability that would allow him to change into her, which isn't the case. They know so little about his Nen techniques that that's the only thing they can assume. It's surprising they don't think that someone could both be pretending to be Hisoka to put the blame on him and then switch to Lynch exactly for him to be further accused. But since they don't have enough information, just assuming it was a manipulation ability works better for them. And if that's the case, what would having her say she's going back to the office accomplish, right? Well, we know it's to keep them away from the Troupe's movements. But Henry's a smart dude and realizes it would be better if she had just disappeared altogether, sending them on a wild goose chase looking for her. Since we know the limit was purposely implanted into their minds, it's interesting to see how these two are getting to the same conclusion together. And just with Lynch forcefully pushing the thought that Hisoka was the cause, it would force them to stick to that answer. But it didn't, because Henry realized it was a way to manipulate who they point the finger at. Sakuro's just a ball of confusion at this point, having woken up not too long ago and seen his partner dead on the ground. And in a few minutes, Henry has pieced it all together, fully aware that there was a fake Hisoka, which led to her death and being replaced. Nothing gets past this guy. The Ziyu family may not have many members left, but Henry is worth the 300 members they lost to the Hail Lee. But now that the cat's out of the bag, things aren't going to be so peaceful between the Ziyu and the Cha-R anymore, seeing as the Cha-R are working in close connection with the Troupe, and Henry has no clue which member it is. It doesn't matter. They're all an enemy now that they've killed Lynch. Luckily, they're not willing to make any drastic moves until they're certain who exactly posed as her and killed her. But one thing is certain, when they find out the truth, it's on. A huge religious ceremony is held for Halkenberg, as expected of someone with so many followers and fans. At the same time, Chrollo opens his book of Nen abilities and uses one from a lady named Narumi. The instructions involve dialing a number for a phone call, which can then lead him to his ideal partner. In this case, it has to do with someone who can help take out Hisoka, and not a romantic evening with a woman. As the phone rings, we can also see that it's not coming from this massive crowd gathering to see Halkenberg. That narrows it down slightly, but keep in mind that there's 200,000 people on the Black Whale, so there's so many places that Chrollo could attempt to find them. And what if he just has bad luck? And I know that sounds a little bit like slapstick comedy, but it's still a possibility on a ship this big. Chrollo realizes how difficult that might be, so he wonders if he should widen the criteria of the person he's looking for instead. With so many strong Nen users on Tier 1, where all the princes are, as well as their guards and those meant to be curses, it makes sense that he'd consider going there. But it's not for the people. It's for what they use in the succession contest. The sacred treasures. This is where things get really interesting because we're about to find out what Chrollo's secret plan is. The 3 relics Chrollo's after turn out to be the seed urn used in the ceremony for the contest, the sacred object that watches everything, probably to ensure the princes don't directly attack each other, and the same for the Nen beasts. It's a Zen Buddha that looks more sinister than spiritual. And the last is called the Blade of Divine Favor, which is basically meant as a prize and symbol for the next king of Kaken. This, I'd wager, is the most valuable, considering it's likely been passed down for countless generations. According to Chrollo, without those 3 sacred treasures, the wealth of the Kaken Empire and all their power would collapse into nothing. And considering that he's always been a master thief, wanting all the biggest riches in the world, how can he pass up on those relics? Not only that, but he thinks they'd be the best way to level up his skill hunter ability, so that he can find the one who can help take down Hisoka. This is because his skills have a limitation that whenever he steals something rare, the stronger his Nen ability can be. It's a risk to try to take them though, because they wouldn't have such precious items just lying around anywhere. In other words, Chrollo's about to risk moving up to Tier 1 and possibly being caught by Kaken guards or Hisoka too soon, just to acquire them. But he's considered that he might face Hisoka before he's ready to, and he has a failsafe in place if that happens. We all know that he doesn't mind dying, so long as the spiders continue on without him. But this time it seems like he's really been cooking up something big for that scenario. So he continues to use his Nen phone in hopes of finding the person with a ringing only heard by him, thankfully. Imagine hearing a noisy ringing while you're trying to mourn a Kaken prince. The phone tells him something different this time. It found the person, but they're too far away to be contacted, which means Chrollo has found the right spot, just not the right floor or tier that they're on. And with only a limited number of calls available to him, Chrollo can't be too hasty as he heads to the upper tiers. Could he be planning to follow Halkenberg's procession as it moves up to the higher levels, pretending to be a guard or otherwise to get access to the areas where you need to be invited? And if he does, what if he bumps into Hisoka, who's been strolling around looking for someone more interesting to face? And something else comes to mind. He has yet to see Kurapika and his connection to the princes. That would certainly be a hard decision for someone like Chrollo, who'd either have to go after one who killed Uvogan, or Hisoka, who betrayed the Troupe and took out Kortopi and Shalnark. Also, I know this is extremely unlikely, but is it possible that the person Chrollo's seeking that can kill Hisoka is actually Kurapika? That would leave him with an even worse decision to make. But regardless, it just seems inevitable that Kurapika and Hisoka team up, with the Troupe getting nearer to their locations with each chapter. Last time on the Black Whale of Death, Chrollo was looking mighty ready to risk his life so that he could take out Hisoka, and Halkenberg's semi-fake funeral was starting. The Troupe split up, and there may have been a traitor in the Cha'ar planning their demise. We still have no idea who Beyond wanted to speak to, and it seems like Kurapika didn't start his classes yet either. But this time, we're focused on Morena and her band of merry thieves. So, many people are gathered to mourn for Halkenberg's death, with not the slightest clue of his devious body-swapping plans. It's the 12th day on the ship, and his body is carried up a ridiculously long staircase. It would be a shame if they dropped him like his body rolled down the steps. Just saying, I'm a big fan of coffin flop. Putting that aside, in case you've forgotten, even someone as sadistic as Saride, as his former military pals call him, has people who still care about him, actually. And we finally get to see them after so long, but it's not under good circumstances. When we first met them, they had just learned of Nen and Morena turning on Saride through Borkson, a fellow member of the Kaken army. But apparently the gang haven't heard from her in over 30 minutes, and they agreed to report anything unusual to each other, seeing as they were meant to be looking for the outlier members. As part of Saraide's guards, they can only assume that Borkson was taken by someone. And not just anyone, seeing as she's a private first class and there's a crowd of people around that would have noticed. But that just leads them down endless possibilities of how it could be done. Either it was a group who grabbed her, or she was tricked into going to the hospital by someone who recognized and then ambushed there. And with their little knowledge of Nen, they consider that an ability could also have been the cause, forcing her to assassinate Saraidenik in the Hyolai's place. Now the problem is how to deal with her being taken. Should they refuse to negotiate and not try to help her as they had agreed? But before they can decide, a senior guard tells them to split up and do their job properly. So Otosin, Momoli, and the others go off to consider the next step. As expected, a group who could successfully do that and can use Nen is Morena's. Borkson wakes up in front of the lady herself, with 2 guards behind her. By the way, I can't be the only one who thinks Borkson looks like a squinty-eyed version of Kacho, right? Sometimes Togashi's characters look so much alike, probably because he's created so many for this specific arc. But once Morena makes it clear that she wants Borkson on her side, it's obvious that she's the one they intended to find previously. Remember how they mentioned wanting to get a person with a specific Nen ability? And the more that they knew about their plan, the less likely they were to accept the offer? Yeah, so Borkson is that person. The problem is that she can't figure out how they got her. And she has no weapon to defend herself anymore, so it makes sense that she'd not accept right away. But at the same time, the longer this takes, the more chance there is that they force Borkson to join them. So, to keep things fair for both sides, Morena proposes a game of negotiations with cards. And it seems like the stakes involve Borkson losing all free will beyond the words yes or no, should she quit or lose. From there, we begin a yes and no game of cards, with Morena being the parent who makes the requests of Borkson. By the end of the game, the final card for the child is the response to the request. But seeing as most are yes, with only 1 no card, it seems it's rigged in Morena's favor. But seeing as there's a return card, there's still a chance Borkson can keep a no at the end by switching out a final yes. And there's a Joker card, which I had previously thought referred to an outside person or even Hisoka himself. It can become either response as needed. But Borkson thinks, as do I, that this game is just a means of making things look fair, when Morena doesn't intend to accept a no. I'd bet she'd keep her there until a yes is given. Oh, and by the way, if you're confused by all of this, that is fine. I don't think Togashi intended everyone to just be on board with this immediately. But anyway, going further, there's another card that appears with just an X on it. This means Borkson can refuse to answer altogether, with Morena promising that she won't force an answer out of her, and will even let her leave without consequences. But do we trust this Mafia lady who possibly killed the previous boss? What if she used a game like this to take control of the Hyolai? Either way, that X outcome is assuming Borkson can end the game with that and not one of the yes or no cards. As much as the game seems fair by having only one straightforward yes card, there's so many ways that Morena can manipulate the cards in her favor. Just by having the illusion that most of the responses can be turned into no is a trick in itself. If anything, the fact that it seems to be in Borkson's best interest to play means that it's anything but that. But all that doesn't matter though, until she knows the other half of the game, which is what the parent cards can do. But there's one more thing to keep in mind. The parent chooses the child's cards for themselves and sends them to the graveyard. Kind of like in Yu-Gi-Oh! So even if Borkson wants to keep the Joker or the no for the end, it might not make it that far, even with the return card. And there's also the possibility that saying no outright will cause physical torture on her that will force Borkson to say yes in the end. One thing she's also not considering is how many Hail Lee members are surrounding the game itself, which means they can observe the cards from both sides and help Morena choose what would go in her favor. Morena's cards include her purpose, in other words, the goal of having Borkson join them. She's even willing to elaborate on this if needed. The next is power, a useful card for someone who knows Nen since Morena will explain her ability. But for a beginner like Borkson, I feel like Morena could only share half of her Nen powers and it wouldn't be questioned. Morena does say that she won't be deceitful when it comes to that, but she doesn't say she won't withhold information. On the other hand, since the game will grow in difficulty the longer it takes, she's going to explain quickly to avoid that. The next card is for the questions that Borkson might have, regarding all things except her ability and the purpose. That's because those two cards are solely to answer those specific things. In other words, Borkson would have to be really good at digging through loopholes if she ends up with the Q card, and doesn't know the rest yet. But the mind games don't end there. Morena will answer 3 questions only, and the answers can lead to even more confusion since one of them is both yes and no. On the other hand, question B card can be used to explain further on one of those confusing answers, but it can only be used on the final question that was asked in question A. So that forces Borkson to leave her most important question for the last one, which would also encourage Morena to reply with yes or no, so that the answer is unclear. Every card is a counter to the previous issue, but also brings up even more things to consider and deal with. With that in mind, and more importantly than the rules of the game, Borkson has to know if Morena will be truthful the entire time or not. Due to her training, she thinks that she can read Morena to tell if she will lie or not. Morena brings up an interesting topic of how difficult cultures respond to questions with negatives in them, with one group referring to the question as a subject, while others respond with themselves in mind. It's like the difference between agreeing with the question, so replying yes, or agreeing with the conclusion, so saying no. And it's something Yokotani, a member of the Hyoli, does due to his background. So they try to make their group seem welcoming and relatable by interjecting, another ploy to get Borkson to trust them easier. But at the same time, Borkson sees this as an interview of sorts. Will she be a good fit for their family or not? At least she gets Morena to answer, but the way she does leaves her with a bad feeling. There's always been something off-putting and deadly about Morena. Borkson spots it as anger strongly coming off Morena, but with no idea where it stems from. We could assume that it might be because of her exclusion from the succession contest, or maybe not being recognized as a legitimate prince when she feels that she should be. As much as this seems like a game where Morena could cheat by using her members, or net ability, Borkson can tell by her personality and the family that she won't. Still, no one else is close to her level, and she has absolute authority over everything going on. But there's still one more card. D. No, not that D. It represents a sort of deal between them, where Borkson would agree to a favor in order to return a card from the graveyard. And unlike with other games that the request could be something unreasonable, in this case, Borkson's free to refuse it. So, with everything explained down to the last card, and with more stress about this game than ever, it's time to begin. Borkson agrees to play, so long as she can choose the cards on the child's side, rather than the parent doing so. And Morena says it's fine since she's done it before. Does she mean with other members of the Hyoli? Or with victims who didn't make it past this game? On the other hand, Morena's side are the ones controlling the shuffling of the cards, which could mean that they set the order that Morena purposely told them to. Having no idea what all their net abilities are, I would be extremely worried about having Morena's people being the ones to control the cards. Sure, Borkson is convinced no one will cheat, but what if they don't consider card counting or net abilities as a way of cheating? Morena has to reveal all her plans and her net, but the rest of them don't. Also, I feel like Morena agreed too quickly to Borkson's request, seeing as it was explained as a part of the game. It feels like she intended for her to ask that, so she wouldn't be able to deny the Hyoli taking care of the cards. Let's just hope that whatever comes next doesn't involve Borkson being tortured for winning the game. I'm sure her military allies wouldn't want that to happen regardless of their plan of action. So coming into chapter 408, it's starting to feel like a mini Greed Island with all the games and teams playing against each other from different corners of the ship, especially because, right now we're in this weird card game between Borkson and Morena. And speaking of that, we started in the previous chapter, but now it's beginning with Borkson's appearance looking slightly different from that previous chapter. And it makes me wonder, do people become more childlike when they're the child in the game? But anyway, the first card she chooses is the purpose card, the one that allows Borkson to know why Morena brought her there, and what she's planning to do. But as she grabs it, she starts small talk, which confuses Borkson, who thought this would be a stricter game. However, Morena agrees that Borkson can chat with her while they play, So Borkson immediately tries to get the Yokotani and an unknown female to answer something, which they won't. Morena has made sure that they won't. Still, Borkson believes there's around 50 members in the Hail Lee, and since she can't ask questions outside of using cards, Borkson decides not to answer any of Morena's questions either. I mean, it's only fair. This gets Morena to compromise by allowing a question for every answer Borkson gives. Even without getting a response earlier, she can tell from the reactions that the Hail Lee aren't as many members, likely around 25 instead. And then we get into the actual game. Morena doesn't lie and explicitly says she wants to get rid of Kaken. And after that, she wants to destroy humanity as a whole. A pretty ambitious goal. But after that, we get a little comedic pause, not unlike some exchanges between Gon and the Troupe, but it's just nice to get a break in tension sometimes, you know, because this is a very tension-filled arc. But basically, Borkson has no idea what that purpose is or why Morena wants to accomplish it just from these two statements alone. Of course, she'd ask for more details, especially since she's needed to accomplish it. Thanks to that, we get some Morena backstory, which I'm sure everybody was waiting for, right? So she mentions the fact about royals who don't have the right to the throne. Someone like her, we assumed, but she says the true Morena is in her grave, and she's not even royal in blood. Two new terms are actually given to us in this sequence: carnival and blasphemy. The carnival refers to the Kaken Empire choosing a village every few years and basically holding a ditty party, to put it lightly. They also separate the people there into those who serve and others. This could also be pronounced as carnival, or maybe other translations will just have a different word entirely, but it all means the same thing. As for blasphemy, that's basically a way for the Kaken Empire to control its citizens and the births from the bloodline. It was stricter before, since people lower in rank would be killed for looking at the royals or directly talking to them. But now it's moved on to contraception, or anything involving the children of Kaken blood being tampered with. In the past, Morena's mom was made to serve during a Kaken banquet for days and without any rest. She passed away when Morena was 2 years old, not even aware that she had a child with her from that time. Because of that, Morena is considered a festival orphan, someone who has royal blood in her, but more like a bastard child. That's also why her face is slashed that way, to distinguish her from the true Kaken children. But as if that wasn't enough, the orphans get sent to a facility managed by the Hail Lee family, used mainly for trafficking people, and also disposing of the mothers like Morena's who were abused to death. In that facility, they're split between the children who are royal but unworthy of the throne, and those who are quote-unquote meat. Guess which one she is? For 20 years, Morena was treated like garbage and put through hell because of that designation. She then was lucky enough, or through power of will, to take control of the Hail Lee as a whole. This whole time, Borkson can't say anything because what could you say? It's a truly horrible way to have lived, and the Kaken Empire are made even more into monsters than they were before. On the plus side though, Morena started working on her abilities during those 20 years, so now she knows she'd be able to overthrow Kaken thanks to that. And as she's been doing that while being classified as a child from the 98 group, 7 more batches of orphan children have been put through the same horrific experience. The most recent group of children arrived in 20, which was a year after Kaken held a major festival to show their advancement in democracy and how they've changed, which clearly, they haven't. But as we know, Morena can't topple an empire on her own. And that's why she recruits so many to her cause. And that's also why she needs Borkson's ability as well. But the answer we, and Borkson, want most can't be answered with just the purpose card. But anyway, Orarge, or however you say this person's name, breaks up the game to shuffle the cards and places them face down for Morena's turn. As agreed, Borkson can choose the cards on her side, but she can't see it beforehand. So she slides it over to Morena. Thankfully, it's a Joker card, which could be both yes and no. so it doesn't change much in the long run. Back to Borkson, she chooses the power card next, and Morena visibly blushes, happy that Borkson is asking about her plans and abilities, specifically before anything else. Whether it's an act to let Borkson's guard down, or she genuinely feels pleased that someone is interested in her, who could say? But I do know some people have started shipping these two since this chapter. I'm not saying it's you guys in the comments, but more so people on the outside spectrum of social media, if you know what I mean. But anyway, seeing as Borkson is a complete novice when it comes to Nen abilities, Morena has to explain from the very top. Borkson compares them to psychic abilities, and even mentions them being used in the Succession War. So her understanding is as basic as it gets, really. Especially since that doesn't take into account people like Gon or Yuvogan, who enhance their bodies, and didn't move outside objects and such like a psychic would. Morena agrees that it would be like psychic powers, with the difference being that anyone can learn Nen abilities through enough and the proper training. Some people can even help others to awaken their abilities with their own, which Morena is able to. With that out of the way, it's time to get into what Morena's Nen can do. So she explains that it's an ability to grant those with the same goal as her power, and it can expand through her Nen ability too. She's designated as the parent, like this game, and can offer power to 22 children at most. Then, when a child reaches a certain level of power, they become a parent of their own, freeing up a spot for Morena to add someone else as a child. Not to mention, the adults she creates with this can make children as well. Morena compares it to a pyramid scheme, but it's probably more so how like society works as a whole, I guess. Especially since Morena can help the graduated children by helping to reach their goals too. From the explanation, Borkson can tell that Morena has manipulated the game to ensure that the two cards she chose would have been picked first. There'd be no way to understand Morena's goal without knowing her ability as well. But at the same time, wouldn't supporting the members' goals possibly disrupt or interfere with Morena's goal to take out Kakin? On the inside, Borkson seems to understand Morena's side, seeing as she doesn't have a great attachment to Kakin, even as a private first class. She joined the military young, without knowing what she was getting into. She loved outside entertainment and culture, even though it wasn't something that she was allowed to do. I mean, she very likely could have been executed for it. I don't want to say that it's like a certain country in the north, but you know. She just wanted to coast on by, living an easy life, and maybe train some students at a military academy. But instead, she's here, on a ship with thousands of people, in the middle of multiple small but deadly conflicts. And now she knows Morena's plan to wipe out Kakin. She can understand her feelings. It's hard not to, really, but it doesn't mean erasing their existence from the world, and then all of humanity next is, something she agrees with. Morena only makes it worse for herself by saying that destroying Kakin is only a small goal for her, and that her entire group all want to kill people for different reasons. This is one of the times where being too honest is, for sure harmful, since it convinces Borkson to do everything she can to stop her plan now. And Borkson rightfully asks how Morena knows that she's the person needed for her plan. She could be using the age-old, "you're special," to convince her to help. But we know that Dogman can sniff out the Nen ability that Morena's looking for. And it turns out Borkson is a specialist. Dogman's also looking for the other unawakened specialists on board, since it's such a rare and powerful category to be in. Not even 1% of Nen users are specialists, according to Morena's research. And considering how many people are on the Black Whale, there could be a few dozen others. As far as I know, I think this is the first time that statistic about specialist Nen users is revealed. Also, I don't think the Hal Lee knows about Kurapika and Chrollo, who are also, the most iconic specialist users that we currently know of. And I think it's probably a mistake to say that any specialist on the ship who agrees with Morena is good enough, because that would make anyone feel less important. Not to mention, Dogman seems to have sniffed out Chrollo browsing with his hotline phone already. But instead of being discouraged, Borkson asks for information about specialists and what Morena could offer her. Morena explains more about specialists, stuff we all know at this point, And Morena reveals herself to be a part of that category too, since she mixes all categories to enact her ability. But she can't tell Borkson about what would be available to her with this card alone. She'd have to specifically choose the yes card to know what would be expected of her in the Hail Lee for the plan. Ararj shuffles again because one card's going to the graveyard. The next card she slides over is yes, while keeping in mind the time limitation, since Dogman is looking for others. With yes out of the game, Morena seems disappointed, as do the members around the game, but I wouldn't trust this just yet. So with the no card put into play, Borkson can find out what any consequences would be. And as expected, if she chooses no, then she becomes someone that can be hunted down for points, as we've seen Hail Lee members do before. And with her knowing so much about Morena, she would be the first targeted. And the X card just makes the game void. It's different from a direct no because it means the game and all information shared is treated as if it never happened. Borkson would be free to go on her own way, and the Hail Lee wouldn't look for her. But considering the goal, Borkson and her allies eventually would be targeted anyway. So why would X be in the game? Well, because it's used as a restriction on Morena that would allow her to get stronger if Borkson is successful. But the no card also offers death to those who played and ended up with that card last. So those who overcame it survived and became stronger. So now we know if the game ends with no, Borkson will, die. Well, it's more like a confirmation. The X is sent to the graveyard, leaving return and no. But before they can process that, martial law is called on the ship. Something that has been hinted at many times has come to finally pass. Now, as for who called this, well, your guess is as good as mine, I suppose. Let me know in the comments who you think it is. But aside from that, it also is possible that Chrollo might be teaming up with Hail Lee at this point, and that could add into what is going down with this martial law. Also, it's possible that Benjamin or Halkenberg, who may be switching to his body, although we haven't seen that, just speculation, caused martial law as well. But for sure, from this point on, things are finally going to get insane on this ship, and I cannot wait to see what happens.
Don't panic, don't panic. The thing that they said was gonna happen has actually happened. No, but honestly, it would have been weird to keep hearing all the characters talking about martial law and it didn't come to pass. It's like if we got all the information about the threats on the Dark Continent and then never got to see it for ourselves. Also, let me point out that for this review, I kind of had to bend space and time a little bit to get a good translation. So if things don't seem completely accurate, forgive me, but I definitely tried. But before we get into the card game again, let's take a moment to consider the cause. Benjamin said that he wouldn't start that procedure lightly. In other words, it would have been a threat to national security. So considering a bunch of princes already died in the Succession War and he didn't care, it has to be something bigger. Many fans are thinking it has to do with the princes connected to Mafia families because an assassination on one of them would mean their delicate balance of peace shattered. And to avoid a war between them, Benjamin would use martial law. But the other thing to consider is we haven't seen or heard from Melody or Kurapika in a while. We don't even know how long Borkson has been with the Hail Lee. So it's possible they completed their plan to kill Lazarus, and his body was found, which triggered this whole incident. But until we go back to the other characters, we can't really say for sure. However, my bet is on it having something to do with Balkenberg's body swapping having gone wrong. Anyway, all the members of the Hail Lee look kind of stunned by the sudden announcement, with good reason. They rely on movement to be able to grow as Nen users, and now they won't be able to go around or kill as much as they're used to. On the other hand, people in the 5th tier, the lowest and below the disposal area, can just go about their business as usual. It mainly affects the circulation between the upper tiers for their security. What do they care about the peasants in the bottom, right? Even the 4th tier has been cut off from the upper ones, but they make it sound like whatever happened was somewhere from the 3rd or higher. And while Morena is considering how to proceed, Borkson just announces that she wants the deal card next, surprising Morena with how calm and focused she is considering the situation. The guards did say anyone moving around without permission would be shot down for threatening the safety of the Cock and Royals.
Meanwhile, the people on the second tier are told to take off all of their belongings and wait in their rooms. And Borkin sees the chaos and panic caused by martial law as a way for her to escape this dire situation. But she also considers that if she gets caught between the Hell Lee and the guards, she could be shot or tortured for a long period of time, and that's just for being in their hideout. Oh, and as a reminder, the deal card means Morena can ask for Borkson to do something in exchange for her to get a card that was put in the graveyard earlier. And what Morena asks is for a kiss. Now, I know the shippers are going wild, but it's deeper than that. Morena's Nen ability functions through a kiss, and she had to give one to each member of the Hell Lee to activate their Nen. In this case, she asks for a deep kiss with tongue, though, and insists that 2 other conditions would need to be met for Borkson to join her, so she doesn't need to worry. The others are saying yes, and witnessing a murder from her or another member. I think it's important to keep that last point in mind for later. Anyway, the hectic announcements are still going on, with the first tier guests being told to just sit tight. A very drastic shift from what the other levels are being told. And Borkson has already put together that Morena is considered adjacent to the royals. So she has first class accommodation already, which would make it hard for Borkson to just run away. But there's also the possibility that Morena has hacked into the announcement system so that she can hear everything, or that this martial law is just a scheme of hers as well. But Borkson can't figure out any of these things if she doesn't let Morena kiss her first. So for anyone expecting a panel, Togashi decided not to show it. Somehow Morena is blushing even worse after the kiss than before. And it's because she realized that she took Borkson's first kiss from her. And then, because she won't tell Borkson how she figured that out, she just causes her to be flustered and want to go on with the game. I don't blame her. Most of the time, it's inexperience that tells you that kind of information. In other words, she probably wasn't great at, French kissing. But anyway, she takes the X card back into the game, seeing as it's the only one that's not a direct no, but allows Borkson to leave without expecting retaliation from their gang. But Borkson does something interesting when she gets the card. She asks to investigate the 3 of the remaining ones. She says it's because she wasn't paying attention during their kiss, so she wants to be sure that they weren't tampered with. That's a fair request, but at the same time, Borkson is very clever. So, there's a theory going around that she actually tampers with the 3 cards while she's checking them, by leaving marks on the edge with a nail or something else. And Morena goes off on a rant about how not being trusted hurts her feelings, especially since she agreed not to cheat in the game. But after Morena whines that they just shared an intimate kiss so she wouldn't need to verify the cards, Borkson gets her way and sees that they are in fact the same. So as before, Ararge shuffles what's left and they continue. Borkson picks the X again, landing it back in the graveyard. So on her turn, Borkson chooses the QA card because she can ask a number of questions and try to get as much information as she can, even if it takes longer to get there. And with that, the speed round begins. Borkson asks about what level the hideout is on, having to go through all of them just to find out it's on none of the tiers. But it is within the Black Whale. Seems like it might be in that secret space where the Troupe had passed with the Cha-R guy from a few chapters ago. You know, that weird looking staircase. To be sure, Borkson asks if she's lying, which she denies. So, with no other hint, Borkson asks if it was created through a Nen ability, and if it's between tiers, which it is. She's very good at deducing stuff with not much to work with. And with just that, Borkson realizes that the Hell Lee, or Morena, intended to have the hideout in that spot since the creation of the ship. Then she asks about entrances and exits, and if people in the other tiers can access this area as well. It takes longer to get the answers because Morena doesn't want to give false information and accidentally lie. Then Borkson pushes to find out exact information on her allies, since she knows that they're less than 25. But it turns out there are now 21 people left, after some were taken out, of course. Despite being more of an enemy than a friend, Borkson promises not to share any of this information when she finishes the game. Likewise, Morena promised that she would leave her and her companions alone. But considering the agreement that she had with Soridanik's classmates, they might not trust her anymore when she returns. But no matter what, ending with a no card is the worst outcome. Because then, she would die. And no way to use anything she's learned. And seeing as she's learning about her and the other members' Nen types, it would be a waste to go out that way. Finally reaching the last question, Borkson feels she's learned a lot about the Hail Lee and the Kaken Empire, and wonders if Morena would ever change her mind. I thought it was clear that she wasn't that kind of person. She might miss some people or feel sad for a person she has to kill, but it won't stop her from moving forward. In that sense, she's like Chrollo and the Troupe, which they said before too. Borkson likely wonders if getting rid of the Kaken Empire and their cruelty that birthed Morena would be enough in the future, but it sounds like it wouldn't be. Borkson looks disappointed, as if she hoped she could have convinced Morena to be less all or nothing with her objective. But the game goes on, with no and return left. Borkson has to choose which card goes to the graveyard, and it's the no. Borkson then asks to flip both remaining cards over at once because one means her death, and the other means that she can get the X card back and leave as if nothing happened. They count down from 3 together, with the big reveal being that the return card is safe. Borkson's relief seems palpable. But this win, and her confident string of questions, is what led some fans to believe that Borkson knew she was going to get the return card in the end, through whatever scratch or bend she left on the card. Also, the fact that she squeezes the card so tightly that she mashes it together and apologizes for that, it could have been a sneaky way to hide whatever evidence of her tampering was on it. And as everyone is leaving, planning to let Borkson go her way as planned, she grabs her chosen card, and Morena is shocked. Instead of X, she confidently chose yes. And there's a few reasons for this. One, she's one of those crazy people who thinks, I could fix her, which is why she kept asking if Morena would change her decision about killing everyone. Or she figured the best way to convince her would be to be within the family, forming a bond with them and her, and at the same time gain Nen and enhance her skills. But she could also be planning to take out the other Hail Lee members and gain levels and power in that way. Or maybe all of the above. There's also a small part of me that thinks the kiss she shared with Morena caused something we don't know yet, too. Like indirect manipulation through Nen or, something like that. So basically, Borkson's having a mini panic attack now that she's been forced into saying yes through her actions. I feel like she should have understood the risk, considering she's so ignorant when it comes to Nen. She's very good at hiding her internal freakout, though. As much as she's feigning innocence right now, Morena knows that Borkson cheated, and that's the real reason the yes card was forced upon her. And I don't trust Morena's gentle look, knowing that someone who is unwilling to be in the Hail Lee is now joining them. Borkson should be very afraid. Also, no, I don't think that she could fix Morena. And without needing to ask, Morena figures out exactly the way Borkson did it, asking to see the cards, marking them, and making it as invisible to the eye as possible. But she even guessed where the marks were left, and why both she and Orage couldn't spot them on the cards from their angles. This just tells me that Borkson is a pretty sneaky lady herself. To have considered the view of both of them as well. The card being crushed was an easy hint though, so it's no surprise Morena knew why she did it. I didn't know if it's better that Borkson admits to her cheating or stays quiet like she is, but honestly, the result probably wouldn't change. As for why the yes card was forced on her, well, the game itself comes from Morena's Nen. If she hadn't tried to manipulate the game, Borkson wouldn't have activated the manipulation ability hidden within it. But I can't blame her for not wanting to leave her fate up to 2 cards. But what's interesting is that it could have been the yes or no card given to her because of the cheating. If you were Morena, wouldn't you want to kill someone who cheats rather than keep them around and risk betrayal? Or is Morena so desperate for her specialist ability that she thinks it's worth it? They're looking for others on board though, which we know there are, so she isn't that necessary. And with no other options, Borkson agrees to join them. But just from how quiet she is, she's planning all her next steps already. And right after the Hail Lee members clap for her, she's pushed down by force, as if made to bow to Morena as the leader. This is where things get serious. So just like if Borkson had gotten the X card, she's now safe from being targeted. And so are those she cares about. For now at least. As for Morena's ability, Contagion is like a mixture of a game and a networking app since they're all connected. and she can see their levels and status. Morena also sees points and abilities of all allies, and as long as they haven't finished the game, I guess by killing the Kaken Empire at the very least, Morena hasn't died or the phone isn't broken, it'll keep going. Also, Morena reminds her of the 3 conditions to be a full-fledged member, with the one about witnessing a murder by another member having yet to be completed. But until she becomes a true member through that rite of passage, she can't move freely. In other words, it's in her best interest to quickly watch someone die, sadly, so that she can then regroup with her actual allies and figure out a plan. And despite the Hail Lee seeming pretty cutthroat, I've yet to see them fight or betray each other, even though Morena says it's allowed. But the look she has when saying that makes it seem like it's not a good idea. After witnessing a murder, Borkson will be at level 1. And to go up to level 2, she will likely have to kill someone herself. If it's a civilian, it's a level 1. A Nen user is 10, and a prince is 50. I'm surprised it's not more actually, considering Morena wants to destroy Kaken anyway. Also, considering what we find out later in the chapter, there might be a way for Borkson to actually hit 50. There's also the option to not level up past 1. But if she does that, there's the risk of the Hail Lee turning on her and pruning her from the family. In other words, it's definitely recommended that she take down some people if she wants to stay alive. But at the same time, we know Dogman's still out there sniffing out specialists, and if they find one with the same bloodlust as the family, or Morena herself, then it's game over for Borkson, and she just wanted a quiet life. And now she's considering homicide just so she can eventually turn on them or kill her way out. Needless to say, Borkson needs to awaken her Nen ability, so it seems inevitable. But anyway, Borkson stands up, ready to go back to her allies. And as much as Morena points out that they're her allies too, they really don't feel like it. She's just someone who made a bad choice and is stuck with them now. But seeing as she's with them now, Borkson might as well find out everything she can. So she has Morena guide her back to where she was, while explaining the details of the members. Once again, she's trying to get as much information as possible, not only in case she's killed, but to use against them. Now rejoining the Kaken Guard side of things and martial law, everyone's being treated like criminals and threatened with bullets if they move. Everything on tier 3 seems to be normal, but another guard discovers an S case, the same poison that was discontinued because of it needing to be used in close quarters. As much as I'd like to say the only big problems are with the Hail Lee and martial law right now, it's really not. Now that Benjamin's team have discovered the Hail Lee's Nen trap / portal, there's a lot more that can happen, like other factions being involved with whatever Phaeton and Finks are currently doing. But Benjamin doesn't have time to deal with Mafia families right now, even if they might have discovered the Hail Lee's base of operations. The 3rd squad can deal with that, because he's got his own plans right now and they're extremely time sensitive. Part of why he called martial law was to be able to round up any prince that could be a threat to him. And some of the highest ranking, like Zhang Lei and Lazarus, are completely out of his grasp. They know the direction Zhang went, but haven't caught him yet. And unsurprisingly, the lower princes aren't as much of a priority as those two. He's also hiding his true motives by suggesting that Zhang is with the Mafia family he's connected to, but the same could have been said for Lazarus. More importantly, Benjamin's internal thoughts seem more stressed than he's letting on. He's been infected by the chemical weapon, and he only has about 10 hours left to finish the succession war if he wants to come out on top. The fact that he's planning to kill or force the other princes into submitting to him before he dies shows his strength of will, that's for sure. But I just wish that we could have heard an inkling or caught a glimpse of however Balkenberg was able to get him infected. Did he go into his quarters, like disguised as Balsamico, and just straight up open it to infect Balsal's body too? And from there, he'd have no choice but to return to his own body, if it's still alive. I guess we'll be getting a flashback chapter in the future to see how it went. But anyway, the only reason Benjamin isn't worried about winning the succession and then passing away is because he knows he has a child to take over for him. Pretty sure most people don't know about this child, except maybe the Justice Bureau. And even so, to get to that point, he'd have to find those 4 other princes with his body slowly deteriorating. And then I guess while on his deathbed, he'd have to get his father's blessing to pass on the throne to his child when he dies. The bureaucracy part seems like it'll be the longest to get through though. Because imagine if Benjamin gets all of the princes out, and then the king takes too long to officiate the documents, so it was for nothing. Still, Benjamin continues down this road to his inevitable death. The first step is to control all parts of government, so it's all under his command, and that includes the Ministry of Justice. He tells this to Bodyguard, whose specialty is dealing with terrorists, Mizaistum, who's part of the intelligence team, and Kaiser, who we know is the ministry's chief prosecutor. But he's meant to be impartial, so Benjamin's plan would force him to follow some unusual orders. Mizaistum's at least willing to humor him, so long as Benjamin's reasoning for this takeover makes sense. But, we know it doesn't. The best way to make a lie seem convincing is to sprinkle in parts of truth. So Benjamin starts explaining that Halkenberg is working with Zhoniin, which, he isn't. But that there's bioterrorism being enacted aboard the ship, putting everyone at risk. Half of that is true, but the lie comes in when he says that everyone is being interrogated and detained to see who the suspects are. But the main problem is all the princes he has in custody, and how he's using them as a way to force his control of everything. Sounds eerily like a certain leader in Asia recently. And Benjamin's also using intimidation, but I doubt that would work on the Zodiacs with all their experience as Nen users. But something that Bodyguard notices is how unhealthy Benjamin's looking. He lies and says he's fine, but I feel like it would have been to his advantage to tell the men that he wants to control that he likely is infected. It doesn't go over Kaiser's head, who predicts that he has less than 24 hours left to live. And that's why he's pushing for everything so quickly. But all the missing princes have to do is just keep moving around, or use Nen abilities that can keep them hidden, and Benjamin's plan will just be demolished. I don't really see it going this way with how forceful and dishonest he's being. I guess we'll have to wait and see who comes out on top, and if the succession contest is close to ending. On the bright side, we've got plenty of time to theorize about what's going to happen next, because unfortunately, this is the final Hunter x Hunter chapter of 2024. Yes, it is once again going on hiatus, however, I don't think this time it will be very long. As far as I know, Togashi has up to chapter 432 maybe already drafted and planned. So, in my opinion, it likely could return around mid-January. Don't quote me on that, but it is a possibility. But again, let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen, and also when you think the next chapter will be released. If you liked the video, guys, please give it a like, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.